I'm Tim Loughton, the MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, and welcome to the Tell Tim website and this video podcast for me to get your views, your concerns on topical issues. And I'm here today to talk about the very topical issue of Europe, that lot just across the channel over there. In the early hours of the Friday the 9th of December, something remarkable happened. Over in Brussels, David Cameron, the Prime Minister, vetoed a proposed European treaty which would have brought greater political and financial union between the countries of the EU, something I don't support, but he vetoed it, something that no British Prime Minister has done before, not even Mrs. Thatcher. And a lot of people said, blimey, here's a Prime Minister actually doing what he says he's going to do. And I think he was right to veto that treaty, and he did so because it was not in the interests of Britain and of British companies, and in particular it wasn't in the interests of the British financial services industry. Now, whatever we might think about what's happened with banks over the last 2 years, financial services is a very important industry to the UK. Last year it contributed £54.5 billion in tax to the revenue. It contributed something like £34 billion to our trade surplus, and it employs over 1 million people. Financial services in the UK account for over 36% of financial services throughout the whole of the EU. It's a big, important business for us, and we need to protect it. And yet a lot of proposals going through Europe at the moment would see our financial services industry under attack, and we could see a lot of that business moving to the continent. Worse still, a lot of the extra regulation that some of our EU partners want to bring in could see financial services moving out of the EU together to Switzerland, to the Far East, or to America, and that's crazy. People in Europe are talking about a Tobin tax. A lot of people here support a Tobin tax, which is a levy on financial transactions, but the EU want a Tobin tax to contribute money to the EU, so there's more money to run the EU budget. I don't support that, and I think it would risk financial services going outside of Europe altogether, and the biggest losers would be British companies, but most importantly the British people involved in those companies and the tax that those British companies are paying to the revenue. So the 9th of December was a really important event. Now, I think you know that I've always been a Euro skeptic. I think the European Union has gone far too far. I want a Europe that's made up of, in this case, 27 trading sovereign nations doing things together that it's in our best interest to do together, getting rid of trading boundaries, not just within the EU, but the worldwide as well. And yet the whole EU project has become about an ever greater empire bringing together sovereign nations and losing powers to faceless and often unaccountable and unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. It's gone too far. The government, which I'm proud to be a member, has said we want it to go the other way. And I think the 9th of December was a really important landmark in saying enough is enough. We are going to take powers back. And we're now working on ways that we can repatriate a lot of those powers back to the British Parliament, where MPs like me are accountable to constituents like you. You can vote us in and out of office. Just before Christmas as well, we made some progress on fishing treaties as well. The common fisheries policy, I think, has been a disaster. It's done nothing to preserve fish stocks, and our fishermen, as a coastal constituency, I see this more than many, have really suffered as a result. Well, our fishing minister went to Brussels and negotiated a better deal for UK fishermen, but we need to do a lot more. I'm concerned about the way the EU spends money. Did you know that since 2008 more than £28 million has been spent on a EU parliamentary TV channel? Apparently only 830 people watch it every day. The EU is just spending another €28 million on acquiring more offices in Brussels and Strasbourg, and the EU wanted to increase its budget. We stood out against that at a time when we're really seeing austerity measures in this country and we're having to rein in spending. Then surely the EU needs to be part of that as well. Now, back in October, we had a debate in the House of Commons. It was a very controversial debate about whether we should have a referendum on our continued membership of the EU now. Now, I said no. I didn't think that that was an appropriate time to have a referendum on a straight in or out question. One of the things I'm most concerned about is the fact that we have many foreign companies in this country, particularly car manufacturers from Japan and from Korea, electronics companies, American pharmaceutical companies, who invest in this country, who employ a lot of people in this country because they see us as a springboard into the EU. Now, if we were seen to be rushing out of the EU, I'm concerned as to whether those companies would stay in the UK, and a lot of people are employed by them. That's a legitimate concern. But I do believe we have to have a real serious debate now about what sort of Europe we want to be in. And if we can't reform Europe, and if we're not going to be able to repatriate some of these powers to the UK, then an in-out referendum may be something that we need to think about in years to come, and it may be something that political parties need to put on their agenda at the next general election. So I voted no in that debate to a referendum, but I'm absolutely voting yes to repatriating powers and getting a better relationship for Britain in the EU that's in the best interest of my constituents and British people up and down the country. So I've set out some questions here. I want your response as to what you think about our relationship with the EU. What do you think we could do better without the EU interfering? What do you think the EU could be doing better with us as part of it? Or are you completely opposed to our membership and think we should come out now? Or do you think we should be further in Europe? Are you in favour of further political and financial integration? All I would say, at the moment, countries throughout Europe and the wider world are really faced with serious economic challenges. We can't afford to get bogged down in political arguments about what's the best thing to be doing within the EU at the moment. What we need to make sure is that we're doing everything we can to get the financial situation back on an even keel. But I've set up some questions here. Give me your answers as usual. Let me know what your concerns are. It makes my job easier. It makes it better for me to be able to represent you in Parliament. Thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts.